boy Blue Gets again, and today we'll be doing a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tier analysis video. And I'll be starting off with Golems. Golems, wow, okay, I'm already screwing things up.
For realsies?
For realsies!
They're a Vrain's archetype, they're link-based, duh. And so far, they only have 6 cards to their names. But their 6 cards are pretty decent. Anyways, let's get started. First off, they have good monsters. They have generic Cyberse cards to work with. They also have decent defense in the form of, I already forgot the Crystal Heart. Duh. And this deck can also link climb pretty easily because somehow just with 2 main deck monsters you could essentially make a link 3 and a link 2. Which is pretty nice. Unfortunately, this deck doesn't have too many monsters to their name, which is their next problem. They lack more names. If this deck actually was like a fully fledged archetype, I feel like they could easily link climb and actually make this deck way more consistent than it currently is. This deck also lacks removal, but at the same time that wouldn't be a problem if this deck actually was way more consistent in bringing out your monsters as well as protecting your boss monsters. Because how many decks can handle like a 3,200 beater? Not too many. That, and because your deck centers around Crystal Heart and being mutually linked to Crystal Heart, it suffers the same problem. It suffers the same problems that Dino Wrestlers have, and that being they can't really do too much damage or they can't really OTK your opponent because of that. So there's that. Also, this deck lacks, I already said lacks removal. Next, this Macro and D-Fish are at 3, and if you know anything about Golems, they like to special summon from the graveyard a lot, and also discard monsters to activate certain effects. And that could be a serious problem, especially if your monsters are banished. Luckily, their spell card, their one and only spell card, actually allows you to special summon from the grave and banished. But still, not really all that favorable. And next and lastly, they generally can't play through 2+ interruptions, especially if they stop your normal summon. You're kinda screwed unless you're playing another engine with this deck, and that's probably going to be the case since this archetype only has 6 cards to its name currently in the game. Also, look forward to seeing a Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypal facelift video on Golems in the near future.
Remember, don't you dare disappoint me!
Assuming I don't procrastinate or assuming that my work schedule doesn't get changed again. Anyways, let's go to Kaijus. I don't think I really need to go into what Kaijus are and what they do, so let's just get started. For the pros, they just get rid of boss monsters. They're pretty fun. They're pretty fun and cathartic in that sense. Like, your opponent just puts out a really annoying board. You could just tribute over their board. Unfortunately, you can only tribute 1. Like, if they didn't have that restriction that you can only control, like, each player can only control 1 kaiju, you can essentially just tribute your opponent's entire board. And no, that wouldn't be OP because there would still be the risk of you getting bodied by, the kaijus you gave your opponent. But then you could also argue remove brainwashing would have just, but that would be slow. But I guess during the time this archetype came out, Konami did not want to risk something like that. The game was slow enough to the point where removed brain controlling would have actually been really OP in this deck if it didn't have that restriction. Next, they have decent spells and traps. Because Slumber honestly makes this deck super playable. Waterfront is ass, and it's only ass because your opponent gets to use your kaiju effects as well, and I really hated that. Because I remember trying to play this deck legit, and my opponent just kept fucking me up with the monsters that I gave him, and I did not like that. And for the cons, this deck also, and that's another problem. You give them a monster. Not only can they use the monster you gave them, so you're technically negging just to give your opponent something. And on top of that, they get to use it. And on top of that, you're playing with the restriction that you can only control one monster since you're playing a Kaiju deck, but your opponent isn't playing with that restriction. So you're already like dueling your opponent with a massive handicap at that point. And so the cons, this deck lacks defense because a lot of the time when I played this deck and I didn't really have a way to prevent my opponent from attacking, which was usually Mystic Mine I used to prevent my opponent from attacking. Yeah, they just killed me with my own monster. And games would just end pretty quickly. Like, even if I like tributed a really problem monster they had, I pretty much just gave them like a 2,200 beater, or even worse, a 3,300 beater. And then I just get bodied on their turn, so it's not really fun. This deck can't OTK because they can't swarm due to their restriction. If they didn't have that restriction that you could only control one Kaiju, this deck actually would be way better. It wouldn't be OP, but it would be way better. Also, obviously, it can't swarm. If you can't swarm, you can't OTK, and I don't know why that's in a lowercase c. Going first is a pain because there's no monsters to tribute going first, unless your opponent just plays on your first turn and manages to special summon a monster, or they somehow get out a Bestial. They somehow get out a Bestial without you having to do much of anything, which highly unlikely. And Mystic Mine is banned, so yeah. Your opponent can use your Kaijus, which is my main issue with this deck. I hate that they can use your Kaiju effect. And because Gamma Seal, and because you have to special summon them in attack mode, you can't just special summon a Gamma Seal from your hand in defense position and use it for yourself. You have to special summon it in attack mode and hope that the Kaiju you gave them isn't stronger. Which is dumb because Gamma Seal is the weakest Kaiju when it comes to attack power. So if your opponent has the Kaiju, you can't special summon a Gamma Seal in defense, you have to special summon it in attack. And then they could just beat over it. And completely negate the whole purpose of you having a Gamma Seal on the field. And if you give it to your opponent, good luck trying to actually do plays. I mean, you could beat over it, but at the same time, would you really want to give your opponent a Gamma Seal they could work with? In the likelihood that you don't end up beating over it? No, that'd be dumb. Also expect me to make a Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypal Facelift video on Kaijus and how to fix them. Anyways, oh yeah, I forgot to list the stats for. I mean, you guys could see it. So, yeah. Anyways, for the stats, I'd give this deck a 1.5 out of 5 when it comes to power because it lacks OTK power, and unless you somehow manage to clear your opponent's board and just slowly beat them into submission with a single Kaiju, you're not really going to be closing out games that often, if not at all. For defense, a 1 out of 5 because for the same reasons I mentioned, like, oh yeah, like if you're top decking or if your opponent already has you on the ropes, treating one of their boss monsters but then giving them another one doesn't really help, especially if your life points are already dwindling. All you'd probably be doing is just helping your opponent kill you faster. And on top of that, you would need 2 Kaijus in your hand to actually get back into the game. Like a weaker one to tribute your opponent's annoying monster, or not even, and even if you aren't just trying to tribute their monster just because the monster's annoying, but just to essentially special summon a Kaiju to your side of the field, you would need 2 Kaijus, one to put on your opponent's side of the field and one to put on your side of the field. And yeah, good luck trying to do that. But then again, Slumber can also help because Slumber also allows you to wipe the field and place 2 Kaijus on the field. And on top of that, you can also banish Slumber from the graveyard to add to your hand. Sorry, there was some interruption. Anyways, you can basically banish to add a Kaiju from your deck to your hand in case you are top decking, but come on. And for versatility, I give it a 2 out of 5 because the Kaiju effects are pretty versatile. The only problem is you need Kaiju counters. And good luck trying to get those. And for consistency, I'd give it a 2 out of 5 because I don't think I need to explain why. Anyways, I would say that this deck is a tier 4 deck. Like, they are table 500, even worse than table 500. But, I mean, it is a pretty funny deck to play, so there's that. Anyways, it's been me, your boy Blue Gatsuga, and I'm out.